Hello, everyone. We're just going to give a minute here for people to get on, and then we will get started. The chat is open, so people can certainly chat among themselves. You are muted as this is a webinar format. So please know that. And we are recording this so that it will be, I see Hang, hi, you have your hand raised. If you want to plant something in the chat, by all means do that. You can do that. As we don't have, great, that's great. All right. All right, we're going to get started. Greetings, everyone. My name is Claire Bondi. I'm the Director of Lay Ecclesial Ministry and Ongoing Formation for the Diocese. And so I'm just here to introduce and say hello. Today's webinar is one of our series called Simple Solutions, where we provide solutions to the everyday problems you have in your work environment. I'm happy today to have Chrisandra Skipper, who will lead today's webinar, as well as a couple of upcoming webinars, which she'll talk about later. And so I'm just going to turn things over to her. And if you have any questions, you can stick them in the chat, and I will do my best to respond to them, or the Q&A piece, but I'll let her talk about that. Thanks.
All right.
All yours.
Thank you. Let me get this screen shared and we will get started with meetings that matter. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm so excited to share with you about meetings that matter. Let's begin this meeting with a prayer, shall we? If you'll join me in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make decisions that might affect the people we serve and those who serve beside us. Continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of being a missionary church that forms disciples of Jesus and for the service of the Diocese of London. We ask all of these things in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, that may not have been like the best prayer for a webinar, but I thought it was a pretty good meeting prayer. So I thought we should start out with it today. So what defines a good meeting? I'm going to invite you to throw some answers in the chat box about what you would say defines a good meeting. Like if you got out of a team meeting or a staff meeting or a parish council meeting or a youth ministry meeting, and you were like, that was a good meeting. What happened there? What kinds of things? I'll give you a second to fill that in. I am like Elf in this meme. Meetings are my favorite. I like having meetings, especially good ones. All right, we're getting some answers coming in. It was time well spent actually resolving problems or answering questions. It stays on time. It stays on topic. On topic was said again. It's effective, helps us to do what we need to do. All right, I'll ask you to continue sharing those. Let me give you a couple of things that maybe some people might answer. I took some guesses of what you might say. It starts on time, right? We like a meeting that starts on time. We love a meeting that ends on time or even early. We like one that follows agenda and maybe no one got upset. That might be what some people define as a good meeting. Let's look then at a bad meeting. And it says answer in the chat. You don't necessarily have to answer in the chat because I put the answers up here. But what are some things where you're like, oh, that wasn't a good one? What defines a bad meeting? Again, I know I cheated. I put some answers here for you. For me, I think that the two things, rudeness, people are not kind. Maybe some unhealthy conflict in a meeting is not good. I would say the two things that I deem as a bad meeting, what makes a meeting bad, are boring, um, or ineffective. Some of the other things that are being shared in the chat, people monopolizes time or someone dominates, bringing up issues and don't really feel like they're being listened to or ignored, getting too sidetracked on other things that aren't priority or aren't important. Yeah, please feel free. You can continue to throw that in there. So today, what we're going to look at is how do we participate in and lead meetings that matter. So our lineup for this afternoon, we're going to talk about prayer and meetings. This is a diocesan webinar, so we're going to talk about how prayer ties into our meetings, how to fix boring meetings. We're going to talk about how to fix ineffective meetings. We're going to talk about how to end a meeting, and then we're going to do questions. Now, my goal is to be done here at 2:30. I'm not going to promise we're going to get to the question and answer by 2:30. So if you have to leave right at 2:30, I totally understand. Throw your questions in the question box. We're recording this, and so the answer to your questions may happen after 2:30, but we'll keep it on the recording for you. So if you have questions at any point in the webinar, please fill them in the Q&A box that's on your menu bar, or you can throw them in the chat and Claire will do her host job and keep track of those questions, and we will get to those all at the end today. All right, prayer and meetings. So we know prayer is an important part of meetings because we do not do these things on our own. We know that we need God, we need the Holy Spirit to join us in these meetings, and we need to center our minds and our hearts on what is the will of the Lord. So my cute little meme for this one is, what the cat looks like before prayer and what he looks like after prayer. A couple of things to consider when we're talking about prayer and meetings. And again, when I talk about meetings in this, and I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, we're talking about a wide breadth of things. A meeting is a gathering of people to share ideas. Meetings can have different purposes and different configurations. You can have a meeting with 2 people, and you can have a meeting with 100 people, and they are going to have to be different because all of those things in between are different. Each meeting has different purposes or goals, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things. But for the purpose of today, when we talk about a meeting, it's really just those gatherings of people, when we're getting people together. For us in the church, that happens a lot in our teams and our staff. So when we have staff meetings, team meetings, one-on-ones with our pastor or our colleagues. We have meetings with groups. Maybe we're planning an event with someone, or we're meeting with catechists who are working on our next sacramental prep program, or we're meeting with KFC people or parish council or finance council. There's lots of times we have meetings. You know that your calendar gets full of meetings. We're talking about all of those today. So we talk about church meetings. One of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is think about tithing your prayer. And so when I say that, I mean, give 10% of your meeting to the Lord. I mean, we're giving all of it to the Lord, but intentionally giving 10% of your meeting to the Lord. So if you have a 45-minute meeting planned, plan for 4.5 minutes of prayer. If you have a 2-hour meeting, you're going to want about 12 minutes of prayer. If you have a 2-day offsite deep dive prayer, you're going to look at, that's 2 8-hour days, let's say. We're going to look at 96 minutes of intentional prayer in there. Now, that's kind of a bare minimum. If you can get more, that's great. But we also want to balance our prayer with our work and have them work in conjunction with each other. But that's kind of the bare minimum. So if you're thinking about like, how do I incorporate, how much prayer do I incorporate in this prayer? Think about tithing your prayer. And finally, in the prayer part is we're talking about participation in prayer. We're going to talk about participation a lot as we go along this hour. But when we think about prayer for meetings, I mean, we had, I think, a beautifully worded prayer that I started with. But what would have taken that prayer to the next level is if we would have had an opportunity for people to participate in that prayer, for people to give or receive specifically in that. So giving their voice, maybe that's just reading, passing around and have different people reading and giving their voice to the prayer, giving their own voice or giving their own thoughts or words. So maybe offering an intention, maybe offering a word that's meaning something to them today, or receiving. Maybe they can receive the words of others, or even just receive some quiet moments of reflection. And so thinking about how can we have people participate in prayer, even in our meetings, that it's not just like okay, read your little prayer and now we're done. How are we inviting people to really put these meetings in God's hands, giving specific time to prayer and allowing people to participate in that prayer to start off their meeting. All right, next up, how do we fix a boring meeting? I think there are two ways that we can do this. We can hook people in and we can get buy-in. So let's dive deeper. Hook people in. For every meeting, there should be something at stake. We need to answer the people's question, why do I care? Why should I be here? In the first 5 minutes, we want to let people know what's at stake at the meeting. What do they care about here? Why did we call them here? We've all been in those meetings that should have been an email. And we're going to talk about those a little bit more. But why have we called you here, whether it's virtual or in person? Why do you want to be here? Why do we want you to be here? And there's kind of two ways that we can hook someone's attention at the beginning of a meeting. We want to do this in the first 5 minutes. So even before prayer, I imagine coming into a meeting and going, okay, guys, on the table today is whatever. It's our team meeting. And today the focus is getting ready for Lent. We're getting Lent ready. And that's the priority. And we want to hook them with one of two things: excitement, giving something people to look forward to, or giving them something they've been asking for even. All right, we've got something coming. It's gonna be really great. Here's what we're talking about. Or appealing to a healthy sense of fear. What do I mean by that? Kind of laying out what is at stake if something goes wrong here. What could happen if we don't prep for a great Lent? What could happen if we don't do the thing that we are called here today to do? And so figuring out what's at stake for yourself as the leader of a meeting, understanding that as a participator in a meeting, and getting people on board as to what's at stake for this meeting is important for everyone, leader and participant. If you're the leader, though, who looks at a meeting and goes, I can't really establish something that's at stake, then be a hero and cancel the meeting. Because if there's nothing at stake, then you don't need a meeting. It can be an email. It can be a little memo. It could be a note on the door. So have something at stake. Understand what is important. Why do we want to be here? Why do we care? The next thing to fix a boring meeting is to get buy-in. I like this little meme. Our meetings would go so much faster if no one spoke. I'm going to tend to disagree. A lot of these meetings I'm going to disagree with, actually, that I put on today. When we talk about fixing a boring meeting, we know that people do not care about things if they do not participate in them. And so without conversation, input, healthy conflict, people don't buy in to what's at stake. They don't buy in to the topic or the purpose or the goal of a meeting. And so we need to get past a seminar-like meeting where someone stands at the front and just spiels like a webinar. You're not participating in this. You're watching it. I'm going to invite you to chat in the chat sometimes, but really there's no good, healthy conversation, conflict, or input that gets put into a webinar. A meeting is different. So we've all been to those meetings that should have been an email, and that's a bad meeting, because without dialogue, without that information, it's just a seminar. Without contribution, if you think, oh, I don't really need anyone's input on this. If I'm bringing a topic to a meeting and I don't need anyone's input on this, then find another way. Write a report, record a little video, send an email. But if it's just, I need to tell you something, then that's not deemed worthy of gathering people for an email, or gathering people for a meeting. Now, all of this intention to have conversation, conflict that leads to kind of effective results is built on a relationship and on trust. And so if you find yourself in maybe your team meetings and they don't have healthy conflict, maybe the leader, the pastor stands at the front of the meeting and kind of just tells you what's happening, then you may need to start with some more intentional relationship building and trust building within your team meetings, to allow you to share more vulnerably, talk about what you think. In meetings, we should be allowing people to be who they are. We want to have more of who you are. So we want people to give of themselves in a meeting to bring us forward. Again, or there's no point of having a meeting. Because if they can't give who they are in their thoughts, and in their reactions and in their wisdom, then there's no point for them to be at the meeting if all we're doing is receiving only. Now, I know there are some people in a meeting who are more givers and more receivers, that there are some people who like to speak a lot in a meeting, and there are some people who like to hold back and maybe need to have some information pried out of them. But we need to allow people to be who they are in those meetings. And we'll talk a little bit later about what a leader does, and what a leader is needed to do in these kinds of situations. Let me talk a little bit about what's written at the bottom here, a forced ridiculous answer. So let's talk about a team meeting. And a team meeting, maybe it's your pastoral team, and you're gathered together. Maybe you meet once every 2 weeks, and you put some things on the table and you're talking about things. Okay, we've got confirmation coming up next week, and there's 3 weddings this month. Do we know like how we're managing all of those things? And we're just getting kind of up to date on what's happening. And maybe something comes up that we need to make a decision on. There's a volunteer dinner that there's a conflict with. It's on Super Bowl Sunday, and we don't think we're going to get the people to come out. So what should we do? We need to make a decision on something. Maybe you've gone around the table and had some talks. Here's the pros of it. Here's the cons of it. And it's time to make a decision. The forced ridiculous answer is an opportunity for you, everyone around the table, to write down an answer to whatever it is. The example, and I'm going to talk about my buddy soon, but the example given in the podcast I heard about this was they were trying to decide what price they should sell their book at. And so they had a book, they were going to sell it, and they were trying to figure out what should we price it at. And they couldn't, how are you going to find out, decide as a group what you're going to price it at. So they did forced ridiculous answer. Everyone needed to write down an answer of what the price of the book was going to be. And so they all did it, and then they all had to go around the table and write it down. And some of the answers might be ridiculous. I think it should be $44. Well, that's ridiculous. No one's going to pay $44 for this book. But a majority of people wrote somewhere between $20 and $25. And so they go, okay, we're reaching some consensus because the answers that everyone gave, yeah, some are not within the consensus range, but hey, a lot of people are saying between 20 and 25. Can we get behind that? And so that's one of the ways we can get buy-in, is to encourage people to share their responses, to get on side and get on track with what we're talking about, and give their input, give their feedback, and share about what they like and don't like about an idea, or what they see working or not working, and how they're feeling about things. Someone talked in the beginning, and we talk about what makes a good meeting, what makes a bad meeting. Putting something out there and not having the opportunity, not being heard, or having your things addressed is really frustrating. And so giving everyone an opportunity to buy in, to contribute to the meeting, is an important way to fix a broken meeting and to, in effect, create an effective meeting. All right. How do we then fix an ineffective meeting? And I think part of those hooking people in, figuring out what's at stake, and then having participation in the meeting is going to help fix the boringness, but it's also going to help make your meetings more effective. But here are 4 other things that are going to help fix an ineffective meeting. Number 1 is the leader of the meeting. Number 2 is the purpose of the meeting. Number 3 is an agenda. And number 4 are notes. So let's dive in. The leader, sometimes we can feel silly. I'm on a committee where someone we call this meeting to order, and there's a gavel, and it kind of feels silly, but there's some order around and importance in having a leader who is determining how this meeting is starting and ending and flowing. What we're going to talk about here is a few things. Who's leading our meetings? Again, there's so many different kinds of meetings. So if we're having a meeting about youth ministry, probably the coordinator of youth ministry is going to lead that. If we're having a meeting about sacramental prep, maybe the youth minister is leading that. If we're having a finance council meeting, maybe that's a business manager leading that. Maybe that's the pastor, maybe that's the chair of a council or a group or committee. But what I want to share that I think is really important, if you're like taking notes and going like, what are the important things Chrisandra's saying? Here's one to put a star beside. The leader of the team or the organization does not need to be the person leading the meeting. And sometimes it's better if they don't. The leader of a team or organization or committee or group does not need to lead the meeting, and sometimes it's better if they don't. Leading a meeting can be tricky. It takes a lot of finesse, and sometimes you can't give your all to a topic. You can't listen fully to everything as you're managing timing, and if it's a long meeting, like when lunch is coming, like there's a lot of things to juggle as the leader of a meeting. And so that means we don't need to have the leader. Maybe in your parish, that means the pastor does not need to be the chair of every meeting. In our diocese, Bishop Fabro does not chair all of the meetings. Even the meetings that he leads, someone else may facilitate those to allow him to fully dive in to the meeting. So find people with the right skills. Maybe within your team, you could rotate who that is. Find chair people in your committees and groups who have the skills to lead meetings, and look for volunteers within, whether it's people, when I say find the skills, I mean, that could be people on your team, but it could be people outside of your team too. People in your parish and your community who have the skills and ability to lead meetings well. And we're going to talk very soon about different kinds of meetings, and there are different kinds of leaders who could effectively lead those kinds of meetings. A conductor. So the leader of a meeting is like the conductor of an orchestra. The orchestra is playing the music, and the conductor is the one kind of guiding along, making sure the tempo stays strong, bringing in people when they need to be brought in, and toning people down when they need to be toned down. That is the role of a leader of a meeting. They're orchestrating conversation. They're managing what kind of discourse or conflict is happening. And when I say conflict, and I think maybe conflict can have a hard word association when it comes to meetings, because we're not talking here about like interpersonal conflict. We're talking here about conflict in making our work better. So disagreeing with each other on how we move forward and having a conflict about the next best step will help you actually choose the best option. If someone puts on the table, I think that we should, I don't know, can't think of something ridiculous right now, but they put something forward and no one says, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea, and has healthy ideological conflict, then you're not necessarily making the best decision for your parish, for your community, for your family, for your team, whoever you're having this with. And so a conductor is also responsible to manage that kind of conflict and the ins and the outs, and find the time when we go, okay, I think maybe we're circling around the same thing, or maybe we've reached a point where the conversation can't go any further, or we're still circling this and we're running out of time, so we need to figure out a way to move forward. That's the role of the conductor leader. It's their job as a leader to ask questions and manage speaking time each person has. So we talked a little bit in that, like, what kind of makes a bad meeting. When someone monopolizes or dominates, they talk about whether that's the leader talking all the time, because I've been in meetings like that, or it's one of the participants who just, has the response to everything and maybe is a little long-winded in how they say it. It is the leader's responsibility to manage the division of time and who gets to speak. It's also their responsibility to call on those kind of quieter people, not necessarily force them to speak all the time, but to call on them. Hey, you haven't spoken yet. Do you have any thoughts on this? I noticed you've been quiet. I noticed you made that face. Do you want to tell us why you made that face? So they're reading the room always, and really conducting and orchestrating the conversation. And it's their responsibility to ask good questions, to get information and to get input and move the conversation forward. So one of the ways to fix an ineffective meeting is to have an orchestrating leader who's not necessarily the leader of the team or organization, but someone who has the skills to do it. Another way to fix an ineffective meeting is to establish purpose. And so this kind of goes back to what's at stake. So what's at stake is really answering the question, why do I care? Like, why do I want to be here? What's the point? There are a lot of things that can happen in a meeting. There's a lot of things we talk about, and it can go from what is our goal or vision for the year or for our entire organization, our parish, our group, to like, what ply toilet paper should we order? You know, like there's a lot of different questions, decisions that need to be made in an organization, in a church, in a parish. And so sometimes we can have what I like to call meeting soup, where we have a meeting and everything is thrown into the meeting. We need to establish big, weighty, lofty idea decisions or brainstorming. And we also need to decide who is coming in to lock the doors on Saturday morning after the group is there. And so we want to avoid meeting soup. So let's talk about the different types of meetings we can look at. This is where we can introduce my best friend, Patrick Lencioni. I've never met him before, but if you've ever heard me talk, you will know that I have a fondness for his work. And I think I just like him as a guy, even though I've never met him before. One of the first books I was introduced by Patrick is called Death by Meeting. And it's about avoiding kind of the pitfalls of problematic meetings. And in it, he establishes 4 types of meetings. This is mainly for our working teams. Okay, so this is for the pastoral team, maybe even the staff, depending on the size of your family of parishes. We use this in for the pastoral services team. Often, this is a model we use. There's 5 people on our team, but this is mostly attributed to use on a team. It can be used in other contexts, and identifying the purpose of a meeting can be applied in other ways too. But for now, we're going to talk about kind of how we can use this on a team level. So our work has altitude. You know, we go from the 30,000, 25,000 foot visioning, wondering, dreaming, brainstorming, and we take it slowly down, figuring out how we're going to make something happen, to like, who's locking the doors and checking the boxes on the little things, 10 feet. We're landing the plane of a project or of an idea as we work through our work. And so the meetings correspond to kind of the altitude of work that we're at. So we'll start with the quarterly offsite. This is a 1 to 2 day type of meeting where you're getting out of the office. It's focused on work, but it's also about big picture things. We're not figuring out the details of anything at this. You know, we're not necessarily crunching budget numbers, but we're talking about in what ways would we want to spend our money? What are our big problems? What are big solutions? And so we've done this a lot with our parish, families of parishes through the That They May Be One program. So if you've done that program with your family of parishes, that last 2-day planning is really a quarterly offsite review, where we're planning and dreaming and coming up with thematic goals, and a lot of that happens there. So this is something where you are outside. This is called quarterly. As a pastoral services team, we do this annually, and that may be more appropriate for you. Like, we can work with what is appropriate for our context. But I do think that having an idea of a meeting that kind of is for big picture ideas off of our regular meeting site is an important differentiator of this kind of meeting. Next, we go to the ad hoc topical, or sometimes called the strategic ad hoc. This is a meeting, maybe 2 to 4 hours. It's about figuring out some of the details on a project, on a specific topic. Let's say at a quarterly offsite or somewhere, someone says, hey, we really have a problem with marriage prep in our family of parishes. It's not effective, or someone's leaving and we have to rework how we're going to do it, or we just need to rethink it because of an idea I had, or something came to me in prayer and I want to figure this out. This would go, oh, we need to strategize about a specific thing. So we're going to have a meeting on a specific topic. prepared in advance. Hey, we're going to have a meeting on marriage prep. Come with ideas. Here's some things to look at before. Make sure you have the right people around the table. Maybe it's your regular team plus someone who's done marriage prep before, or someone who you're looking to bring in to help. So making sure you have the right people around the table. This is a discussing, analyzing, brainstorming, and deciding on critical issues kind of meeting. So the big talking point or the big thing to remember about a strategic ad hoc or a topical ad hoc is it's about one thing. So we're going to avoid meeting soup by trying to like rework our marriage prep at a like staff meeting. That's not appropriate. We have other things to do in a staff meeting. At a staff meeting, we need to look at tactical things, lower to the ground things. At a strategic ad hoc, a topical ad hoc, we're looking at one thing that would go beyond what we want to discuss in a staff meeting. Let's move on down that plane landing to our tactical staff or just a tactical meeting. Pastoral Services does a tactical meeting every 2 weeks. And we've really embraced this model. And I encourage you, again, if you're starring things, if you've got your highlighter out, what are some of the really important things Chrisandra said in this meeting is let's think about the tactical. And I'm actually going to put a pause in it because I have the whole next slide about tactical. I'm going to jump quickly to daily check-in. This is a meeting, especially if you're on site with people, just like a standing meeting, you don't sit down. It should be 5 to 10 minutes. Hey, what's the one thing you're working on today? We have a big event this week and like, we don't have the name tags in. Do you need help with name tags? Like it's a way to connect informally around like the actual crossing the T's, dotting the I's of what you're doing today. Or I'm off site today, but there might be a delivery. Can you just keep an eye out on that? Something like that. They're just daily check-ins. It's especially effective when you're on site, but I do know of some families of parishes that work off site and they do come together on Teams or on Zoom to connect daily so that they're still connected at different meetings. So, or at different locations, if their offices are on multiple sites, that they come together virtually to still do a daily check-in to have an understanding of what's happening across the whole family of parishes together. Let's jump into the tactical. So this is that second from the bottom. We're at 5,000 feet. The timing of this meeting would be a 45 to 90-minute meeting. This would replace a pastoral team meeting, I would say. So if you have a meeting, and again, this depends on the size of your family of parishes. Some people only have 5 people on staff. And so maybe the whole staff comes together for this. Some people have 25 people on staff. So it's just pastoral team that might come together on this. Really finding who is important to be there for making the tactical things happen. Who helps make things happen? So the agenda for a meeting like this would be prayer. Again, like we talked about at the beginning. Then you go into a lightning round. A lightning round is, it's important to keep it lightning. It's fast. Each person gets 30 seconds to a minute tops to share about different things. Some options would be kind of the main go-tos. What is 1 to 3 important things that are happening in your work world this week? And so sharing kind of what's a priority for you right now. You could also, we've used what's something you need help on and what's something you need to highlight this week. So we'll have everyone go around the table and give something you need help on and something you want to highlight that's going on in your work world this week. I've seen other options like what do you want more of right now? And what do you want less of in your work world? How can we help you with that? What's making you mad right now? What's making you glad? Sometimes some of you may have been in a meeting where I've facilitated that conversation, but really a fast, quick, even pre-prepared potentially. This is the big things that are happening that I just want you to know of. If you're having these meetings regularly, like I said, we have these every 2 weeks. It's just that, hey, I have a webinar coming up this week that's kind of my priority. And then I also need to make sure I call this person and I got to figure out details of this. That's like how quick that response should be. From there, this meeting going into it, I know, hang on to your hats, people. This meeting does not have an agenda coming in. So it's not like, hey, we're meeting on Wednesday. Here's the 5 things that me as the chairperson decided are important for us this week. Or me as the pastor, whoever's making the agenda. Even if it's everyone send your agenda items before the meeting, and then you have a list of 18 things that people sent you an email about. Plus we have other business that like 12 things are going to come up at, For this meeting, the strategy of this meeting is that there is no agenda coming in, that everyone around the table has the opportunity to share their lightning round, 30 to 60 seconds. From those things shared or from like the other things, you determine an agenda in meeting. So the next part of the meeting is to create the agenda. Hey, of the things you talked about or the things going on in your world, do you have agenda items? Do you have things you want us to discuss and talk about together? Yeah, we really need to talk about the confirmation commitment mass this week. I need to like get some input, or I need to fill you in, or we need to figure out how this is going to work. So together, you're listing the things on an agenda that you think are important. From there, then you process the agenda. Okay, we've got the items on the agenda. Here's kind of the most important thing we talked about, and then have a conversation. But the key is that you're talking about tactical issues. So how are we making things happen? So this means like there's no brainstorming here. We're talking about projects that have crossed the decision point. We know what we're doing. We're just kind of moving our work forward. If you're familiar with a working genius, this is tactical and enablement work. Maybe some galvanizing in there. If you don't know the working genius, I'd love to talk with you more about it. And sorry if this sounds like gibberish, but we are going to postpone any strategic conversation to a strategic ad hoc meeting. So on this slide, I have kind of what we use for our team tacticals. I have like a little list, and I run this through when we're doing our team tactical. So our lightning round, I jot down what people say for their lightning rounds, and then I write down our agenda items. Okay, we need to talk about the webinar on Thursday, and we need to talk about this email that I got that I need your input on, and we need to figure out whatever. So we talk about those, we process it, we talk about those things. If we get somewhere and we go, oh, this sounds like it might need more, like we need to really think about this, maybe we need to research it more, maybe we need more people around the table. If this is a strategic meeting, I check it off. Hey, we need a new meeting about this. We need a strategic one agenda item meeting on this topic. If not, then maybe there's an action. What are we committing to? For confirmation prep this week, Joe's gonna open the door at 1 because I can't get here till 1:30, but I will be here at 1:30 with the pizza and the cookies. If you know, so literally like we're talking about details here. And we record action items, things that need to get communicated or decisions that are made. We're trying here to help each other. So we're trying to hear what other people are doing and offer our assistance to work as a team and not as a silo. So I'm bringing to you the things that are important in my work world right now so that I can invite you in to be part of it. Okay, so the 3 things I want you to remember about a tactical meeting. Oh, sorry, then we're going to check out. I'm going to talk about at the end on how to end a meeting because they're all the same. So we'll talk about that at the end. 3 things to remember about a tactical. Keep the lightning round lightning. It is fast. Okay, leader, make sure people are rolling through those things fast. Sometimes the pastoral services team maybe goes on like slightly too long. I'm going to rein that in though. Keep it tactical. Strategy belongs elsewhere. And track your commitments and actions well as who owns those commitments and actions. So when I say that, hey, Bill's going to open the door. Judy's going to look into the marriage prep program that they're doing down the street to see how that will work for us. And we're going to plan the strategic meeting for marriage prep in 2 weeks. But giving people not only figuring out what the action item is, but who owns the action item, who's going to make sure that that gets that takes place. Okay, that's the tactical meeting. Again, if there's anything that you take from meetings that matter, I think that the age-old team meeting where we come together with this long agenda of things that we're circling around, maybe we're trying to figure out some strategy together, trying to figure out tactical things together, is not an effective way to work as a team in especially the family of parishes model, but really kind of in any work. And so I highly encourage you, if you are a leader, to try this. if you are not a leader, to talk to your leader about trying this. If you need help, I will come in and help you do tactical meetings. I'll help facilitate a couple of them for you and get them going, because I think that this could have a huge impact on how we work as a team, and break down some silo things, because this is where we really can communicate and work together. All right. So just circling back, so those are the 4 types of meetings. We do have other types of meetings. We have committees and boards and groups, and a lot of the things that we're talking about here can be applied there. But we're going to need to establish purpose for those meetings too. So let's talk about the agenda. Now, like I said, not all meetings need agendas coming in, like the tactical meeting or a stand-up meeting in the morning. Like that does not need an agenda. Go around the circle. When we talked about buy-in, we talked about people participating, and I think it's important to allow participants to help design the agenda in some way. So, kind of the traditional way to do that would be, hey, does anyone have anything to add to the agenda? But another way to do it is to put together an agenda. Here are the talking points that we want to touch on today. And before the meeting actually gets started, doing a round of what do you think the most important thing that we need to accomplish at this meeting is? And instead of going through the things in the order that the chairperson or the secretary or whoever made the agenda decided, as a group, you're elevating the important things to the top and you talk about those first. So have a round when you're having a meeting, when you're having a parish council meeting, when you're having a finance council meeting. These are the things on the agenda today. What do you think is most important for us to accomplish? And establishing that together at the beginning, hearing from everyone and figuring out what kind of the consensus is on what's important, can make a huge impact on how we move meetings forward. There are 2 kind of tricks or hacks to kind of develop really good agenda items. One is to establish the purpose, and one is to establish the question. There are some different purposes of an agenda item, and I might suggest, if you have these traditional agendas, that this be placed right on the agenda. Topic number 1, prayer, or check-in and then prayer, the hook and then the prayer. What's at stake first? I don't know. But let's say topic number 3, the volunteer dinner that needs to be postponed. Just so you know, I touched base, and yes, all the youth group leaders have something else that day, so they'll be able to come. These things for review is something that happened. You talked about a previous meeting. Maybe you have an answer to. You have something to review or touch on from a previous meeting. Maybe it's going over action items from a last meeting, something like that. These are quick. For information are bullet points. Remember, this is not a state of the union or a state of the parish. If you think that you need to just give information, then find a different way. Now, sometimes we need to give a couple of points before we have a discussion. So these are bullet points, quick, brief. This is for information. The next one's for discussion. So the purpose of this agenda item is for us to discuss. We want to discuss marriage prep. Okay, we need a couple of topics here. Maybe this is a pastoral council meeting. Maybe this isn't your team meeting. We want to talk about marriage prep. What are your thoughts? What have you heard? What's your input? We just want to have a discussion about it. We're not trying to make a decision. We're just trying to hear what's happening and what you're thinking. Finally, another purpose of an agenda item is for a decision. We have to make a decision today if we're postponing that volunteer dinner. I keep going to the same examples, but we have to make a decision here. We have to make a decision on a new mass time. We've been taught, we've had discussion around it, we've reviewed it, today we have to make a decision on what's gonna happen. And maybe we do forced ridiculous answers to get there. Maybe we can find consensus naturally, but if it's on the agenda and you need to figure something out, then you say, this is for decision making tonight. We need to figure out the budget. There's so many things that those decision points can be. So one of the ways to kind of fix an ineffective meeting is to really lay out the purpose of each agenda item. What is the purpose of what we're going for? So that I don't come in and I see volunteer dinner on the list, and we're just trying to decide what the new date is. And I think we're reimagining the whole thing. And I start brainstorming new ideas. Nope, that's not what we're trying to do today. Our decision is to find a new date. So establishing what the purpose and goal of an agenda item is will help gather people all on the same page, and really help make the discussion and the input that people give as effective as possible. Another way you can do this is to word your agenda items as questions. So if you're trying to figure something out, ask a question about it. Should we do this or that? How could we do this? What do we do now? What went wrong? Even if it's just a like information sharing, we should be asking or answering the question, why do we care? What's at stake? What's happening? And for every agenda item, we either want to find an answer to the question or make a plan to figure it out. That could be a strategic ad hoc meeting. It could be, you know, two people touching base. Hey, this isn't a whole team thing. These two people need to touch heads and figure this out on their own. You know, we've given you some information. Now you get to go out and figure it out. Those, I mean, that kind of sounds like we're just sending you off to the abyss. That's not really what I mean, but figuring out what is the next step and drawing conclusions to conversations. So that's the goal at the end of an agenda item. So again, to help fix ineffective meetings, we need to sometimes have good agendas, because we know not all meetings need to come in with agendas. But if we are making agendas, we need to identify purpose, or even ask agenda items as questions to engage people in those conversations. Okay. One way to help fix ineffective meetings is note-taking. I like this meme, you and your coworkers reviewing the meeting notes when there's no action items. So you may notice that oh wait, let me just, so notes or it didn't happen. Have you ever heard like pictures or it didn't happen? Maybe that's like a millennial thing. If it's not on the Instagram, then it's not real. You know, I recently posted something on Instagram that said, like, if the Bondi Skipper family went to Bright Lights Windsor, the like Christmas light festival, and didn't post it on Instagram, did it even happen? Brett Powell actually shared this, and I'm not sure if this was with senior leadership for the diocese or with the pastors when Brett Powell was here with our pastors or priests. But basically he says, like, if a meeting doesn't have meeting notes, then the meeting basically didn't happen. Like, there needs to be concrete notes about a meeting. Now, I like to call them meeting notes and not necessarily meeting minutes. We're not like a legal necessarily entity that needs to have like defined minutes and motions and all those kinds of things. Nor should this be a transcript of every single thing that every person said in a meeting. Meeting notes have a purpose. They are either to refer back to talking points, maybe to help fill in people who weren't at the meeting, but especially they are to document action items and who owns those actions, document any commitments that the team or group is making, and document any decisions made. That's the purpose of meeting notes. Talking points to refer back to, action items, commitments, and decisions. You may, if you are the person taking the minutes, want to use a template that says like action items, and anytime an action item comes up, you write it down. Commitments, anytime you commit to something, you write it down. Anytime there's a decision made, we made the talking point was volunteer dinner. I know I keep going back to the same thing. And the decision was we're postponing it until February. So those points are made for a purpose. So how to fix ineffective meetings. We talk about the leader as the orchestrator conductor. We talk about the different types of meetings, avoiding meeting soup and finding the purpose of each meeting. We talk about having good agendas with proper descriptions and goals for each of those topics. And we talk about having good notes that especially determine action items, commitments, and decisions. How do we then end a meeting as we're coming upon 12 minutes left of this webinar? How do you end a meeting? So this is like a checkout at the end of the meeting. I talked about this a bit at the tactical, and this should take 5 to 10 minutes in a meeting. And this is where we're going to clarify 3 things: what was discussed, what was decided, And what do we need to disseminate? I spelled disseminate wrong on the slide. I spelled it right in my notes, but it's wrong there. I know that. You know that. Okay. So what needs to be what was discussed? What were the talking points? Okay, today we talked about confirmation next week. We talked about marriage prep. We talked about that volunteer dinner. We decided Bill's going to make sure the name tag place is in the right table, right? Yeah, Bill's going to do that by Saturday. Sarah's going to look into the marriage prep program down the road, and she's going to set up our strategic meeting and make sure that Sue and Bill are there because they help with marriage prep. And we did decide we're postponing the volunteer dinner. We will decide on a date after Bob's vacation. Again, so those are the talking points and the decisions. What do we talk about? What action items are there? Who's owning them? And what are decisions made? Why is that important? Because sometimes when we have big conversations about things, when there's conflict, we don't always agree, when we're circling around different options or ideas, we need clarity on what we did decide, on what we did agree to, on what action items are going forward, and if I'm responsible for doing them. Because I've come out of a meeting going, how did we end that? Like, I think that we're going to do this, but I'm not sure. Like, and someone else could come out of the same meeting and go, I think we're doing the other option or even like just slight variations on it. We want to make very clear that everyone in the meeting has an understanding of decisions and action items that are moving forward. And then finally, disseminate, spelled wrong, what to whom and what to hold. So who do we need to share some of this information with? Well, Sue is going to let the KFC know about the dinner postponement. Those kinds of, who are we going to tell? And then publicly, what are we going to share? What are we ready to share with parishioners at this point? Hey, we need to talk about a new mass schedule. I think we need to do some work on it. We decided that we need to have another meeting about it, but we're not going to share this publicly yet. We're going to make sure we have all our ducks in a row before we start talking about this. So we are holding this information not as a secret. We're holding until we have the right message to share with people. And so making very clear, what are the things that are not to be shared outside of this meeting now? What are the things that maybe you should share with your team of volunteers or the people who work with you? Or so really specific, somebody was not in this meeting that we need to tell something specific to, but also generally, what are we sharing and what are we not sharing about the things that we discussed in this meeting. So that's how we end a meeting. We clarify what was discussed, what was decided, and what do we need to disseminate. Or let's just use communicate. I know it doesn't start with D, but it's a lot easier to spell. Okay, so we're going to circle back to what defines a good meeting. And I think we had some of these things at the beginning when you guys were putting in the chat. I think we can keep starts and ends on time. But I would shift some of those other points to say, we knew that it was a good meeting because something was at stake. People were engaged. There was no meeting soup, and the decisions and actions going forward were confirmed. Yeah. And hopefully, if we do all those things, then we can all be like Buddy the Elf, and everyone can like a good meeting, because like I truly do love going to meetings. As we wrap this up, I will send you the slides. I'll make them part of the resource package. I'm also going to share with you, there's a really good package or a website or page on the Xavier University site that just has like prayers to go into a meeting. So if you do need here are some nicely worded stuff to start our prayer time, I'm going to send that to you. It's about all different kinds of meetings that they use for their like trustees and board and things like that. I'm going to share with you a podcast that I lifted like a little bit of this from my buddy, Patrick Lencioni. The podcast is called At the Table, and it's episode 190, Why Boring Meetings Suck. I'm going to share with you the information about the 4 types of meetings and a tactical template. So if you were to start this tactical meeting, kind of a template like I use a half page, but maybe, especially if you have a bigger group, you might need a whole page. You might need 2 pages to make it happen, but I will share a template with you of how you can move through a tactical meeting. So that sums up, oh, look at that. We have 7 minutes left for questions and chatter. So that sums up what I have prepared for you today. I invite you to, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat or in the Q&A box, and I will be happy to help with them. I'm going to stop sharing now. Hang
Thank you, Chrisandra. I'm gonna come on here. I will gallery me. Obviously, if you have any questions moving forward, Chrisandra is always available to reach out to. This is one of her areas. I don't want to call it expertise, but she has a great passion for it and a real gift for it. So if you're looking for ways to improve your meetings, I will say that I often hear from team members about the disasters of meetings, the frustrations that come with them. And the reality is, and I don't even think Chrisandra said this along the way, but that meetings are really where work gets done. Like if we're not meeting, we're not connected as a team. And particularly in families of parishes where people are not always in the same location, or they're running here and there to different parishes. It's really important that we're connected and that we have an understanding of what one another is doing. So having effective team meetings, or meetings in general, are going to help us to do better work. And I think having meetings where people look forward to showing up is really important, because it can be frustrating when you're like, oh my gosh, I got another meeting and I have so many things to do and this is going to be useless, waste of my time. So, all right. Okay,
Yeah, I think,
questions. Go ahead.
oh, okay. I was just going to say, I think that just to follow up on that, like, yeah, why is it so important that we have good meetings? I've heard people say, oh, good, that meeting's done, I can get back to work. But the reality is, like, if you're having good meetings, then work is being done in those meetings, and actually more effectively than if you were doing them on your own. It helps break, if you can have meetings helping each other and having discussions, it breaks down the walls between the silos and really helps bring together a group of people, whether that's people on your team or people on your parish council from different parishes. I've sat in meetings where the leader just sits and gives a state of the union, a state of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are there are not getting called on to share anything. Like, that's one of the most frustrating things in a meeting to me.
Put it in.
I would rather have like a conversation that's going here, there, and everywhere than a meeting where I am just, or the participants of the meeting are just sitting, listening. It's not a meeting. That's a presentation.
Yeah. There's a question. So we have pastoral meetings every 2 weeks and full staff meetings on the other weeks. They look the same. How do we make them what they should be? How to decide who needs to be at which meeting? Administration team, pastoral staff, pastoral team.
Yeah, so really identifying what purpose is for those meetings. So in a pastoral team, often there can be I think maybe sometimes even some more strategy stuff comes out. But I think that at a tactical, we have our administrative assistant Olin at our tactical meetings. And sometimes she doesn't have as much input to share on like what project she's working on, but she hears and is involved in the things that we bring to the agenda. And she goes, oh, I can help with that. She has an understanding of how she's going to help in her administrative role execute the things that we're doing, the tactical getting things done. And so for a tactical meeting, there's a couple of things, challenges that I kind of preempted in my brain when I was thinking about this for a family of parishes. One is, what if a family of parishes has a staff of 15, 20 people? That's kind of not a tactical meeting. It can be broken down a little bit in terms of smaller groups, or like site groups, but I would say figure out what you need, what you want to accomplish at the staff meeting and what you want to accomplish at a pastoral team meeting. Maybe pastoral team meetings are a little more strategic. Maybe they're not the tactical, and you bring in admin and other people, other roles for a tactical meeting when you're talking about Ash Wednesdays in, 4 weeks, is it 4 weeks, 3 weeks? Like what we need to figure out the like tacticals of getting this stuff done. Are things ordered, our books here, where are they going? That you want kind of everyone there for. So establish what the purpose is and then determine how you're going to build a meeting around what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and if I'm reading that right, Father Peter, you're looking at which I think your model is a model that a lot of parishes use from or families use from what I hear. Is that the pastoral team is then at a meeting every week, and the administrative team is there every other week for the whole team. And maybe I misread that, and maybe that's not your model, but that's what I hear about a lot. And again, I think it goes back to what is the purpose of the meeting? And if it's just about information sharing, is there a better way to do that? Is there a check-in process that you can do? Those kinds of things that maybe don't include everybody at the same meeting. We use in our on pastoral services team, the weeks we don't have a meeting, we do a check-in via a Teams chat. So we have a Teams chat, and we throw out in the Teams chat, what's on our agenda for this week that's going to take up most of our time. What was our greatest accomplishment in the last week? And then we just do like, what was a GIF for your weekend, but something where there's connectedness. The other piece, I watched a webinar this week about having an understanding of the gifts of the people on your team. And this relates a little bit back to what Chrisandra talked about Working Genius, which I think, so we do touch on Working Genius in That They May Be One. It's in the first session of That They May Be One that we do now, where we identify what each individual's strengths is in regards to work specifically. And then, but this webinar she talked about having an understanding of the gifts of each of the people on your team. And the best way to do that is to be present with them. And so sometimes meetings have that purpose, but are there other ways to do that that isn't a command performance? So you have an understanding of, if I need something, this person's really good at it, and it's going to take her 15. We do that in our office. If I can create a document and Chrisandra's like, let me clean that up. She may have nothing to do with the formulation of the document, but she can make it look pretty in 15 minutes where it would take me 2 days. So I let her do it because that's her gift. So understanding how we work with each other is also important. All right. Again, we are here if you need support. And Chrisandra, what is our next webinar topic about?
Our next webinar topic is about time management. So how to prioritize your work, how to make yourself most productive in those times that you do have to do the non-meeting, with people sitting at your desk kind of work. And so really we're going to touch about different techniques and strategies that can be used to manage your time well.
And that is on February 15th, so the day after Ash Wednesday, same time frame, 1:30 to 2:30. And information will be in parish briefings, but you can go to, I think it's just, if you go to dol.ca/gatherings, all the information there, the registration link will be there. All right, thanks, Chrisandra. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.